Marcus wiped the sweat from his forehead as he sorted through another pile of donated items at the community center. As the volunteer coordinator, he had seen everything come through those doors. Old clothes, broken furniture, toys missing pieces. But today something different caught his eye. In the corner of the storage room sat an old motorcycle, covered in dust and rust. The black paint was faded and the chrome bumpers had lost their shine years ago. Most people would have looked at it and seen junk, but Marcus saw potential. The community center was always looking for items they could fix up and auction off to raise money for their youth programs. "Where did this come from?" Marcus asked Jenny, one of the other volunteers who was organizing clothes nearby. Jenny looked up and shrugged. "Some old guy dropped it off yesterday evening. Said he didn't need it anymore and hoped someone could use it. Didn't leave his name or anything. Just unloaded it from his truck and drove away." Marcus walked around the motorcycle, examining it more closely. Despite its rough appearance, he could tell it was well built. The frame looked solid, and when he checked the engine, it seemed complete. This wasn't some cheap bike that had been thrown together. This was quality machinery that had simply been neglected. "Think it's worth trying to fix?" Jenny asked, noticing his interest. "Maybe," Marcus replied, running his hand along the seat. "If we could get it running, it might bring in some good money at the auction." The youth center could really use the funds for their summer camp program. Over the next few days, Marcus couldn't stop thinking about the motorcycle. He had some mechanical experience from his younger days, and he figured it might be a good project for some of the older kids in the community programs. Teaching them about engines and responsibility while potentially raising money seemed like a perfect combination. The following weekend, Marcus enlisted the help of 3 teenagers from the center. Tony, a 17-year-old who was always getting into trouble but had shown interest in cars. Maria, a 16-year-old whose father was a mechanic. And Jake, a quiet 15-year-old who was good with his hands but struggled in school. "So what do you think?" Marcus asked as the 4 of them stood around the dusty motorcycle. Tony was the first to speak up. "It looks like a piece of junk to me. Why are we wasting time on this old thing?" Maria disagreed. "My dad always says you can't judge an engine by its outside. Let's see what's under the hood before we give up on it." Jake just nodded quietly, but Marcus could see the curiosity in his eyes. They spent the morning cleaning off years of dirt and grime. With each wipe of the cloth, more of the motorcycle's original design became visible. The fuel tank had some beautiful detailing that had been hidden under the dust. The exhaust pipes, though rusty, had an elegant curve to them. As they worked, Marcus noticed something interesting. The bike wasn't just well made. It had been well maintained at some point. Someone had clearly loved this machine. The bolts were the right ones, not random replacements. The cables had been properly routed. Even in its current state, he could see signs of careful ownership. "Look at this," Maria said, pointing to a small dent in the fuel tank. "This has been repaired really well. Someone knew what they were doing." Tony was starting to come around too. "Yeah, and check out these tires. They're old, but they're good quality. This wasn't some weekend warrior's toy." By the end of the day, they had the motorcycle looking significantly better. It still needed a lot of work, but now they could see what they were working with. Marcus felt more confident that this project could actually succeed. As they packed up their tools, Jake finally spoke up. "Mr. Marcus, do you think the person who donated this knows we're fixing it up?" "I don't know," Marcus replied. "Why do you ask?" Jake shrugged. "I just feel like there's a story here, you know? Like this bike meant something to someone, and now it's just sitting here." Marcus looked at the motorcycle with new eyes. Jake was right. This wasn't just any old bike. Someone had cared for it, ridden it, maybe even depended on it. Now that person had given it away, and Marcus wondered what story lay behind that decision. "Well," Marcus said, "maybe someday we'll find out. But for now, let's focus on getting it running again. I have a feeling this old bike has at least one more adventure left in it." As they locked up the storage room, none of them could have imagined just how right Marcus would turn out to be. The motorcycle was indeed special, and its story was far from over. In fact, the most important chapter was just beginning, and it would change all of their lives in ways they never expected. 2 weeks into the restoration project, the small team had made impressive progress. The engine was cleaner, the rust had been scrubbed away from most surfaces, and they had managed to get the electrical system partially working. Tony had surprised everyone with his natural mechanical ability, while Maria's knowledge from watching her father work had proven invaluable. Jake remained quiet but focused, often noticing small details the others missed. Marcus was particularly proud of how the project was bringing the three teenagers together. They came to the community center every day after school now, eager to work on the motorcycle. Other kids had started hanging around too, curious about what they were doing. "The carburetor needs a complete rebuild," Maria announced one afternoon, her hands black with grease. "But I think we can do it. My dad showed me how to clean these last summer." Tony was lying under the bike working on the exhaust system. "The pipes are in better shape than I thought. Just need some new gaskets and maybe some polish." Jake was carefully examining the speedometer and gauges. "Mr. Marcus, look at this," he said, pointing to the odometer. "This bike has over 80,000 miles on it. That's a lot of riding." Marcus whistled low. 80,000 miles. That means this bike has probably been across the country multiple times. Think about all the places it's been, all the things it's seen. As they worked, they began to piece together clues about the motorcycle's history. There were small modifications that suggested long-distance touring. A more comfortable seat, extra mounting points for luggage, a larger fuel tank than standard. This wasn't a bike that had been ridden around town on weekends. This was a machine that had been built for serious travel. "Check this out," Tony called from underneath the bike. He had found a small metal plate bolted to the frame, partially hidden by the engine. Years of road grime had made it nearly invisible, but now that it was clean, they could make out some numbers and letters stamped into the metal. Maria squinted at the plate. "Looks like some kind of military designation. My uncle was in the army and he had numbers like this on his gear." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. He had served in the military himself years ago, and he recognized the format of the numbers on the plate. This wasn't just any motorcycle. This was a bike that had belonged to someone in the service. "Jake, can you get me that magnifying glass from the toolbox?" Marcus asked, trying to keep his voice steady. With the magnifying glass, the details became clearer. The plate showed a unit designation and a service number. Marcus's hands began to shake slightly as he realized what he was looking at. "What is it, Mr. Marcus?" Maria asked, noticing his reaction. "I think," Marcus said slowly, "this motorcycle belonged to someone very special. These numbers, this format. This is how we marked equipment for special operations units." Tony slid out from under the bike, suddenly interested. "Like special forces?" "Maybe," Marcus replied. "Or someone who did very dangerous work for our country." The three teenagers looked at each other with new respect for the machine they had been working on. This wasn't just an old bike anymore. This was potentially a piece of history, a machine that had served alongside someone who had risked everything for others. "So what do we do now?" Jake asked quietly. Marcus thought for a moment. "We keep working on it, but we also try to learn more about where it came from. Maybe we can find out who owned it, what their story was." Over the next few days, Marcus made some phone calls to friends who still had connections in the military. He gave them the numbers from the plate and asked if they could find any information. Meanwhile, the restoration continued. The teenagers worked with even more dedication now, knowing they were potentially restoring a piece of military history. They researched the make and model of the motorcycle online, learning that it was a type often used by special units for transportation in difficult terrain. "Look at this," Maria said, showing them an article she had found on her phone. These bikes were used in some really dangerous missions. They had to be reliable because soldiers' lives depended on them. Tony was looking at the bike with new eyes. No wonder it's built so tough, and no wonder someone took such good care of it. Jake had been quiet all day, but now he spoke up. "Do you think the person who owned it is okay? I mean, why would someone give away something this important?" It was a question that had been bothering Marcus too. Military personnel didn't typically give away equipment that had served them in dangerous situations. There had to be a reason, and Marcus was beginning to suspect it might not be a happy one. A week later, Marcus got a phone call that changed everything. It was from a friend who worked at the Veterans Administration. "Marcus, I found something about those numbers you gave me." The voice on the other end said, "I can't give you a lot of details over the phone, but I can tell you this. That bike belonged to someone very brave. Someone who did things that most people will never know about." "And Marcus?" "Yeah, he's still alive. And I think he might want to know what you're doing with his bike." Marcus's heart raced as he hung up the phone. The owner was alive, and somewhere out there he might be wondering what had happened to his motorcycle. but finding him wouldn't be easy. His friend at the VA had been careful not to give out personal information, only saying that if Marcus really wanted to connect with the owner, he would need to go through proper channels. The next day, Marcus gathered Tony, Maria, and Jake around the motorcycle to share what he had learned. The three teenagers listened intently as he explained about the phone call. "So he's really a war hero?" Tony asked, his usual tough attitude replaced by genuine curiosity. "My friend couldn't give me details, but yes, it sounds like this man served his country in some very dangerous situations," Marcus replied. Maria was running her hand along the fuel tank, imagining the journeys it had taken. "I wonder why he gave it away. Do you think something happened to him?" Jake, who had been quietly thinking, suddenly looked up. Maybe he didn't mean to give it away permanently. Maybe he just needed help and didn't know how to ask for it. Marcus was struck by Jake's insight. The boy might be quiet, but he often saw things that others missed. "You know what, Jake? That's a really good point. Maybe he donated it because he couldn't take care of it anymore, not because he didn't want it." This possibility changed everything. If the owner had given up the motorcycle out of necessity rather than choice, then perhaps returning it in perfect condition would be the greatest gift they could give. "So what's our plan?" Maria asked, already rolling up her sleeves. "We finish the restoration," Marcus said firmly, "but we do it right. This bike is going to be perfect when we're done, and then we find its owner and give him the surprise of his life." The work took on new meaning after that. Every bolt they tightened, every part they polished, every system they repaired was done with the knowledge that they were preparing a reunion between a veteran and his trusted companion. Word began to spread around the community about the project. Local businesses started donating parts and supplies when they heard the story. Mike's Auto Parts gave them a rebuilt carburetor at cost. Sarah's paint shop donated the primer, and paint needed to restore the original black finish. Even the local motorcycle dealership offered to help with any specialized tools they needed. But it was Mrs. Chen, the elderly woman who ran the corner grocery store, who provided the most unexpected help. She stopped by the community center one afternoon to see what all the fuss was about. "My late husband was in the army," she told Marcus as she watched the teenagers work. "He had a motorcycle too after the war. Said it was the only thing that made him feel free again." She studied the bike carefully, then pointed to a small detail on the handlebars that the group had missed. "See this little modification here? My husband did the same thing to his bike. It's so you can attach a small bag for important documents. Only soldiers who had to carry sensitive materials did this." Marcus felt goosebumps rise on his arms. Every new detail they discovered about the motorcycle painted a picture of someone who had lived through extraordinary experiences. 2 weeks later, they were making the final adjustments to the engine when Jake made a discovery that stopped everyone in their tracks. He was cleaning out the small compartment under the seat when his fingers touched something that didn't belong. "There's something in here," he said, reaching deeper into the space. What he pulled out was a small, weathered photograph wrapped in plastic. The image showed a young man in military uniform standing next to the same motorcycle, but new and shining. He was smiling, but there was something serious in his eyes, something that spoke of experiences beyond his years. On the back of the photo, in faded ink, was written, "Afghanistan, 2003, me and my girl, ready for anything." Robert, Maria said softly. "Now we have a name." Marcus took the photo with trembling hands. The young soldier in the picture couldn't have been much older than Tony was now. But something in his stance, in the way he held himself, spoke of responsibility and courage that most people never had to develop. This motorcycle wasn't just transportation, Marcus realized out loud. It was this man's lifeline. In dangerous places when he needed to move fast and quiet, this bike probably saved his life more than once. Tony was staring at the photo with a new understanding. "And now he's old and he had to give it away." "Not if we can help it," Jake said firmly. It was the most determined anyone had ever heard the quiet teenager sound. The photograph changed their approach to the final stages of the restoration. They didn't just want the bike to run well, they wanted it to look exactly like it had in that picture. They spent hours researching the original specifications, making sure every detail was authentic. Marcus also began a more serious search for Robert. With a first name and the knowledge that he had served in Afghanistan, he reached out to more veterans organizations. The process was slow as privacy laws protected veterans' information. But Marcus was persistent. Then, one afternoon, as they were putting the finishing touches on the newly painted fuel tank, Marcus got another phone call. This time it was from a veterans counselor in a town about 2 hours away. "I can't give you his personal information," the counselor said, "but I can tell you that there's a Robert here who matches your description. He's been struggling lately, and he definitely had to give up some possessions that meant a lot to him. If you're serious about wanting to return his motorcycle, I might be able to arrange a meeting." Marcus looked at the gleaming black motorcycle, now restored to its original glory. The chrome shone like mirrors, the engine purred like a contented cat, and every detail was perfect. But more importantly, it represented something else now. It represented hope, healing, and the power of community to change lives. "Yes," Marcus said into the phone. "We're very serious. When can we meet?" The meeting was arranged for the following Saturday at the Veterans Center in Pine Valley. Marcus loaded the restored motorcycle into a trailer, while Tony, Maria, and Jake sat in nervous excitement during the 2-hour drive. They had spent weeks preparing for this moment, but none of them knew what to expect. "What if he doesn't want it back?" Maria asked for the 10th time. "What if seeing it makes him sad?" Marcus had wondered the same thing. Sometimes gifts from the past could bring more pain than joy, especially for veterans who had seen difficult times. But Jake, as usual, had the most thoughtful response. "Then at least he'll know that people cared enough to fix it," Jake said quietly. "Sometimes that matters more than the thing itself." The Pine Valley Veterans Center was a modest building surrounded by well-maintained gardens. As they pulled into the parking lot, Marcus could see several older men sitting on benches outside, some in wheelchairs, others using walking canes. The sight reminded him that heroes don't stop being heroes when they get older, but they do face new battles. Sarah Martinez, the counselor who had arranged the meeting, met them at the entrance. She was a kind-looking woman in her 40s with the patient demeanor of someone who worked with people facing difficult times. "Robert doesn't know exactly why you're here," she explained as they walked through the building. "I told him that some people had found something that belonged to him, but I didn't give details. He's been having a hard time lately, and I didn't want to get his hopes up in case this didn't work out." She led them to a common room where several veterans were watching television or playing cards. In the corner, sitting alone at a small table, was an elderly man with gray hair and tired eyes. Despite his age, Marcus could see traces of the young soldier from the photograph in his face. "Robert," Sarah called gently, "these are the people I told you about." Robert looked up, and Marcus could see confusion in his eyes, followed by a flicker of hope that he seemed to be trying to suppress. The old soldier stood slowly, his movements careful and deliberate. "I'm Marcus," Marcus said, extending his hand. "And these are my friends Tony, Maria, and Jake. We're from the community center in Millfield." Robert shook hands with each of them, his grip still strong despite his age. "Pleased to meet you," he said politely, but Marcus could hear the question in his voice. "Mr. Robert," Marcus began, "we found something that we believe belongs to you. Something that someone donated to our center a few weeks ago." The old veteran's eyes searched Marcus's face as if trying to solve a puzzle. "I haven't donated anything lately," he said slowly. Marcus pulled out the photograph they had found in the motorcycle. "We found this hidden in a compartment. I think you might remember it." Robert took the photo with shaking hands. For a long moment he stared at it in silence. Then his eyes filled with tears and his voice broke as he spoke. "My God," he whispered. "Where did you find this?" "It was in your motorcycle," Tony said, unable to contain his excitement any longer. "We've been fixing it up and it's beautiful now." Robert looked up sharply. "My bike? But I thought—" He trailed off, confusion evident on his face. Sarah stepped forward gently. "Robert, do you remember when your nephew came to visit last month? When you were in the hospital?" Understanding dawned on Robert's face, followed by a mixture of emotions: sadness, anger, and resignation. "Tommy said he was taking care of my things. I thought he meant he was storing them. I think maybe he thought he was helping," Marcus said carefully. "But we're here to bring your motorcycle back to you. It's outside, fully restored and running perfectly." Robert stared at them in disbelief. "You fixed up my old bike. But why would you do that for a stranger?" Maria stepped forward, her young voice full of sincerity. "Because it's not just a bike. It's your partner. It went through everything with you, and it deserves to be with you." Robert's composure finally broke completely. Tears streamed down his weathered face as the full meaning of their gesture hit him. For several minutes the room was silent except for the sound of the old veteran crying, not from sadness, but from overwhelming gratitude and relief. "I thought I'd lost everything," he finally managed to say. "After Martha died, after I had to move here, after Tommy sold most of my things, I thought the last piece of my real life was gone forever." Jake, who had been quietly observing, spoke up. "Can we show it to you?" "We worked really hard to make it look just like it did in the picture." Robert nodded, wiping his eyes. The group made their way outside to the trailer, with several other veterans and staff members following curiously. When Marcus pulled back the tarp, revealing the gleaming black motorcycle in all its restored glory, a collective gasp went up from the crowd. Robert approached the bike slowly, as if he couldn't quite believe it was real. He ran his hands over the fuel tank, the seat, the handlebars, all the places where his hands had rested thousands of times before. "It's perfect," he breathed. "It looks better than the day I bought it." "We found the original paint coat and everything," Tony said proudly. "And the engine runs like new." "All the maintenance has been done," Maria added. "New fluids, new filters, everything checked and double-checked." Robert turned to look at the small group who had given him back a piece of his life. "You don't understand what this means to me," he said, his voice strong again. "This motorcycle and we went through hell together. In places where every day was dangerous, where I had to carry information that could save lives or cost them. This bike never let me down. Not once." He paused, looking at the machine with deep affection. "When I came home, it was the only thing that helped me feel normal again. Riding these roads, feeling the wind, remembering that there was still beauty in the world. It saved my life in a different way." Marcus felt a lump in his throat. "We hoped it meant something like that to you. But how can I ever repay you?" Robert asked, looking around at the four faces that had changed his life. Jake smiled. The first really big smile Marcus had ever seen from the quiet teenager. "You already did, Mr. Robert. You served our country and you trusted us with your story. That's payment enough." What happened next surprised everyone, including Robert himself. Instead of simply accepting the motorcycle and saying goodbye, the old veteran had a proposal that would change all their lives. "I want to tell you something," Robert said, still standing beside his restored bike. "I'm 73 years old and I live in a place where I can't really take care of a motorcycle properly. I have nowhere to store it, nowhere to work on it, and honestly my riding days are probably behind me." Marcus felt his heart sink. After all their work, was Robert going to give the bike away again? But Robert continued, "However, I also can't bear the thought of losing it again. So I have an idea, if you're willing to listen." The group gathered closer, curious about what the veteran had in mind. "What if this motorcycle became a bridge between us?" Robert asked. "What if you kept it at your community center, maintained it, and used it to teach other young people the same lessons you've learned? And what if I came to visit regularly to share stories and help with the teaching?" Tony's eyes lit up immediately. "You mean like a partnership?" "Exactly like a partnership," Robert confirmed. "The bike stays active and useful. You kids continue learning about mechanics and responsibility. And I get to be part of something meaningful again. Plus, on nice days, maybe this old soldier could take one more ride." Sarah Martinez was beaming. "Robert, I think that's a wonderful idea. It would give you a reason to get out, stay active, and share your experiences." Maria was practically bouncing with excitement. "We could start a whole program. Teach other kids about mechanics, about history, about service to country." Jake nodded enthusiastically. "And you could tell us about the places you went, the things you saw. Real history from someone who lived it." Marcus felt a warmth spreading through his chest. This wasn't just about returning a motorcycle anymore. This was about creating something bigger, something that could impact the whole community. "Robert," Marcus said, "I think that's the best idea anyone's had in a long time. But are you sure? This is your bike. Your memories." Robert smiled, and for the first time they could see hints of the young soldier he had once been. "Son, the best memories are the ones you share. I've been keeping these stories to myself for too long. Maybe it's time to let them do some good." The arrangement was formalized over the following weeks. Robert would come to the community center twice a week to help with a new program they were calling Wheels and Wisdom. Young people would learn motorcycle maintenance while hearing stories about courage, service, and perseverance. The first official session was held on a sunny Saturday morning. Word had spread through the community, and 12 teenagers showed up along with several adults who wanted to support the program. Robert arrived wearing his old army jacket, his medals polished and proud on his chest. "Before we touch a single tool," Robert began, standing next to his gleaming motorcycle, "I want you to understand something. This machine and I have been through more together than most people go through in a lifetime. Every scratch that we fixed, every part that we replaced, every mile on that odometer represents a story about never giving up." He pointed to a spot on the frame where Tony had done some welding work. "See this repair? In the original damage that was here, I learned that sometimes things break, but that doesn't mean they can't be made strong again, sometimes stronger than before." Maria raised her hand. "Mr. Robert, were you ever scared when you were overseas?" Robert considered the question seriously. "Every single day," he answered honestly. "But being scared doesn't make you a coward. Being scared and doing your job anyway, taking care of your teammates anyway, serving your country anyway, that's what courage really means." As the weeks went by, the program grew beyond anything Marcus had imagined. Robert turned out to be a natural teacher, patient with the teenagers but firm about safety and precision. The motorcycle became a learning laboratory, where young people discovered not just mechanical skills, but life lessons about dedication, teamwork, and resilience. Tony, who had initially seen the bike as just a project, became Robert's most dedicated student. The old veteran saw something in the tough teenager that reminded him of himself at that age, and he made it his personal mission to help Tony channel his energy in positive directions. "You've got good hands and a good mind," Robert told Tony one afternoon as they worked together on the engine. "Don't waste those gifts on getting into trouble. Use them to build something that matters." Maria found herself fascinated by Robert's stories about the technical challenges he had faced in the field. "You had to fix things with whatever materials you could find," she marveled. "That's like my dad, but even harder." "Your father sounds like a wise man," Robert replied. "He's teaching you skills that will serve you your whole life. Never underestimate the value of being able to fix things instead of throwing them away." But it was Jake who surprised everyone the most. The quiet teenager began opening up in Robert's presence, sharing his own struggles and dreams. Robert recognized a kindred spirit in the thoughtful young man. "You know, Jake," Robert said one day as they were adjusting the motorcycle's carburetor, "some of the best soldiers I knew were the quiet ones. They saw things others missed, thought before they acted, and always had their teammates' backs." "I'm not soldier material," Jake replied softly. "Maybe not in the traditional sense," Robert agreed, "but you've got something just as valuable. Wisdom beyond your years and a heart that cares about doing things right. Don't ever think that's not important." The program's reputation began to spread beyond the community center. Local newspapers wrote articles about the partnership between the old veteran and the young volunteers. Other veterans began stopping by to share their own stories and expertise. But for Robert, the greatest reward was something simpler and more personal. For the first time since his wife's death, he had a reason to get up every morning, a place where he was needed and valued, and young people who looked forward to seeing him. "You know," he told Marcus one evening as they watched the teenagers carefully washing the motorcycle after a day's lesson, "I thought giving up that bike was the end of something important in my life, but it turned out to be the beginning of something even better." 6 months after that first meeting at the Veterans Center, the Wheels and Wisdom program had become the pride of the community. What started as a simple motorcycle restoration had grown into something that was changing lives throughout the town. The program now had a waiting list of young people who wanted to participate. Robert had been joined by 3 other veterans who brought their own expertise and stories. The community center had received donations to expand the workshop space and purchase tools for other restoration projects. But the real measure of the program's success could be seen in the transformation of its original participants. Tony had discovered a passion for mechanical engineering and was now applying to technical colleges. His grades had improved dramatically, and he had become a leader among the younger students in the program. Robert had recommended him for a scholarship sponsored by a veterans organization. "A year ago, I was heading nowhere fast," Tony admitted during a local TV interview about the program. "Mr. Robert didn't just teach me about engines. He taught me that my hands could build things instead of breaking them, and that my energy could help people instead of cause trouble. Maria had started her own small business, offering motorcycle maintenance services to people in the community. Robert had taught her advanced diagnostic techniques, and her father had helped her set up a proper workspace in their garage. At 16, she was already earning money doing what she loved. The best part isn't the money, Maria explained to her friends. It's the feeling when someone brings you a bike that won't run, and you can make it purr like a kitten. Again, Mr. Robert says that's the same feeling he got when he could fix equipment in the field and know that it might save someone's life. Jake had perhaps changed the most of all. The quiet teenager had found his voice through the program, discovering that he had a gift for teaching younger children. He now assisted Robert with the newer students, and his patient, thoughtful approach made him incredibly effective. Jake reminds me of the best sergeant I ever served under, Robert told Marcus one day. He doesn't need to shout to get people's attention. He just does things right, and others want to follow his example. For Robert himself, the program had given him a new lease on life. The Veterans Administration counselor reported that his depression had lifted significantly, and he was more active and engaged than he had been in years. He had even started dating again, having met a retired nurse named Patricia who volunteered at the community center. Robert is like a different person, Sarah Martinez observed, having a purpose, feeling needed, sharing his experiences. It's been better therapy than anything we could have provided in a clinical setting. The motorcycle itself had become something of a local celebrity. It appeared in parades, was featured in magazine articles about community programs, and served as a rolling advertisement for the power of restoration, both mechanical and human. But its most important role remained as a teaching tool. Every week, new students learned to change its oil, adjust its brakes, and tune its engine. Each maintenance session was accompanied by Robert's stories about resilience, teamwork, and the importance of taking care of the tools that take care of you. One particularly memorable afternoon, Robert decided to take the motorcycle out for a ride with Marcus riding alongside on a borrowed bike. As they cruised through the countryside, Robert shared something he had never told anyone before. "You know, Marcus," he said during a rest stop, "when I first came back from overseas, I used to ride this bike for hours just trying to make sense of everything I had seen and done. The road was the only place where my mind felt quiet." He paused, looking out over the rolling hills that surrounded their small town. "I thought those days were over forever. But riding with you today, knowing that bike is helping other people find their way, it's given me that peace again, but in a different way." The program's influence began to extend beyond the community center. Other towns started similar initiatives, asking Robert and Marcus to help them set up their own Wheels and Wisdom programs. The concept was even picked up by a national veterans organization as a model for other communities. As the first anniversary of the program approached, the community decided to hold a celebration. Local businesses donated food and decorations, and veterans from across the region were invited to attend. The mayor even proclaimed it Wheels and Wisdom Day, in honor of what the program had accomplished. On the day of the celebration, Robert stood before a crowd of over 200 people, with his restored motorcycle gleaming beside him. Tony, Maria, and Jake stood with him, no longer the uncertain teenagers who had first started working on the dusty old bike, but confident young adults who had found their paths in life. "A year ago," Robert began, "I thought my story was ending. I had lost my wife, my health was failing, and I felt like the things that had made my life meaningful were all in the past." He placed his hand on the motorcycle's fuel tank, the same gesture Marcus had seen him make that first day when they returned it to him. "But these young people taught me something important. They taught me that sometimes what looks like an ending is really just a new beginning in disguise. This old bike that I thought was worthless became the foundation for something beautiful, and this old soldier who thought he was used up found out he still had something valuable to offer." The crowd erupted in applause, but Robert wasn't finished. "The real magic wasn't in restoring a motorcycle," he continued. "The real magic was in discovering that when we invest in each other, when we share our stories and our skills, when we refuse to give up on things that matter, that's when ordinary people become extraordinary. And ordinary communities become something special." As the celebration continued around them, Marcus found himself standing quietly beside the motorcycle with Robert, Tony, Maria, and Jake. The five of them had been brought together by chance, Or perhaps by something more than chance and had created something that would outlast all of them. So, Marcus asked Robert with a smile, any regrets about giving up that old bike? Robert laughed, the sound rich and full of joy. Not a single one. Sometimes the best way to keep something is to give it away. That old bike taught me its final lesson, that the most valuable things in life are the ones we share. The motorcycle sat gleaming in the afternoon sun, no longer just a machine but a symbol of renewal, community, and the enduring power of human connection. And in that moment, everyone understood that some stories don't really end. They just become the beginning of something even better.